much to the Law School of Zanzibar. Law School of Zanzibar is a newly established government institution. It's in its infancy stage. It's almost 3 years old now. Uh, we are falling under the ministry responsible for constitutional, legal affairs, public service, and good governance. So our main function is to train people to become qualified lawyers in Zanzibar. Now we have a system here where before being allowed to practice law in the courts after a university education, you must come to us for 1 year, at least for practical program. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, that was just a brief introduction, but the purpose of the meeting will see each that section take this opportunity to request. We have to have a kind of self-introduction. We should know where are we, which institution, which country are we from, and then we can go ahead.
Expanding that term around quite a lot. You may or may not be familiar with it across different contexts. It's sometimes called different things. So people might say emotional AI, they might say automated empathy, affective computing, if you're from more sort of computer science or human-computer interaction background. But essentially, we're looking at systems technology that uses artificial intelligence techniques to try to sense, learn about, and interact with human emotional life. And we use that quite broadly. It might be whether someone is happy or sad, but we might be looking at kind of stress, motivations, anything that kind of deals with this kind of intimate, emotional, or kind of intimate life of the person. And as you kind of might imagine, that raises a number of additional connections because it is that much more intimate. It's a very broad term, involves a variety of technologies and devices, but essentially if it's sensing, interacting with users' emotions and moods, we kind of classify it as emotional AI. And it can be just monitoring emotions. So we're seeing it increasingly used in market research, for example. We'll have an audience play a piece of media, and the AI will monitor and analyze different reactions to what people are being shown. And then people use that to provide insights for their marketing promotional materials. Often we're seeing it have kind of more active interventions. Just to kind of make this a little bit more concrete, I'm going to provide a couple of examples. This is something that I did a little bit of research about, so from the kind of more security side of things. A couple of years ago, Network Rail, which is a big transport provider in the UK, installed trialled smart cameras in a number of major transport hubs in the UK. For a variety of different reasons. So we've got detecting thefts, spotting trespassers, but also to provide emotion metrics on customers, ostensibly to say, can we do better? Can we improve the customer experience? So we see someone moving through the station, they don't look very happy, let's work out why, okay? There were suggested use cases that also went a little bit further. They weren't actually done because of failure of the cameras, but things like detecting those at suicide risk. So again, very, very kind of intimate judgments based on facial expression, body position, and using that to infer psychological state and behaviour. So again, there's this real shift to kind of intimate experiences. I don't know how people in Zanzibar might feel about this. Personally, and with the citizens I spoke to, there were kind of concerns around the accuracy, so being able to accurately read people's emotions, but also issues around consent as well, because this was rolled out without much consultation at all in big transport hubs, so it's not like people could just decide not to go through these train stations. They had to, they wanted to go home. And that, again, raises a lot of questions around this technology. So again, balancing the potential value. So it might save someone's life. But we have to think about kind of accuracy, invasion of privacy as well. Another example that I wanted to bring up, because it was in the news recently, but also I found a connection to Tanzania certainly, but the increasing use of these technologies as kind of therapy, counselling, well-being, and again, requiring very sensitive personal health data. And it may be, again, that this is a way to combat, in the UK, in the West certainly, we have what's called a loneliness epidemic, and also a lack of access for many people to care. And so potentially, again, great benefit for this, but we do need to think about sometimes the unanticipated implications of using these type of technologies. And again, one of the reasons I want to highlight that was I was reading through the sort of Ministry of Health's policy framework, and I found one of their projects was essentially looking at kind of developing this technology, addressing the mental health needs of adolescents in schools, in the community, and at an institutional level in Tanzania and Vietnam through the co-creation and application of digital technology. So even if it's not named emotional AI, it appears to be something that is on the radar of Tanzania, that they are kind of interested in these technologies. So again, I'd be interested if this is the same in kind of Zanzibar as well. So this is a very broad range of technologies. So for the purpose of our standard, we were trying to be a little bit more specific. And so we're kind of very interested in the overlap of these three areas. So we have at the top general purpose AI. So that's AI that can be used for diverse tasks and goals. So it's not kind of ring-fenced for a particular function, a particular task. So if you think about the kind of upstream models, these big, large language models, well, they can be used for entertainment for a chatbot. They might be used for customer service. They might be used for mental well-being for counselors. So a variety of different uses. There has to be some appearance of understanding how people see things. That's where we get the empathy element. And then partners, so kind of sustained interactions, sustained uses. And you probably be more familiar in terms of how these systems are marketed and promoted to us. So assistants, companions, co-workers, therapists, friends, advisors, all these things that we might think of as AI partners. And it's something that popped into my head earlier when we were having the discussion around educational technology as well. Certainly we're seeing at least one school in the UK that I know of who have an AI classroom where each child is essentially given one of these AI partners who customizes and personalizes the curriculum and what they see. So again, a range of different kind of use cases, but within these parameters. Sorry. Oh, yes, of course.
What is this I?
Sorry, yes, I should. So this is the standard that we're working on. So I won't go into too much detail now because I'll pass over to Ben to talk about it. But a standard being soft law, so guidance that we hope is picked up by developers and designers, but also those responsible for regulation as well. Again, often it's easier to kind of understand these different technologies if we have kind of concrete examples. So again, this is just something that I think is kind of most prevalent in the news, certainly in kind of the Western and the UK context. But these kind of AI companions, is this something that you have in Zanzibar at all? So like an AI friend? No? Okay. I imagine maybe in a few years you will start to be inundated
Maybe
with these.
in the younger generation, you
Yeah.
don't know.
Maybe.
Teenager, they may know better.
I tried once.
Oh, okay, yeah.
It's an interaction with
Yeah.
and
Yes.
I might ask, so sorry to put you on the spot, but you did say you were an AI user. So have you come across this before? Or?
I come.
Okay, yes. So this is almost the next step. So it's not just informational, but it's relational as well. And sometimes it kind of gets advertised as kind of interactive media, so as a kind of entertainment. But a lot of these companies are really playing on this element of it's a friend, it's a companion. So always here to listen and talk, always on your side. And it goes further. It's not just typing and interacting. Character AI is a very, very big player in this field, and you can get your avatar to phone you. And so you're speaking to this person. And again, this raises a lot of questions around the relationships that we're building with this technology. And so one of the ways of thinking about this is through this distinction between strong and weak empathy. So when we talk about AI companions and emotional AI, empathic AI, what we're really saying is they do this top, they do weak empathy, okay? They can act like they're sensing, reading, profiling, judging, making rules about the states and behaviors of people, and interacting effectively or otherwise with intimate dimensions of human life. And they can do this very well. It can almost seem magical, the kind of responses that you're getting back, and how they seem to be judging your emotional state and effectively responding to it as well. However, they are machines. It is emulated empathy. What they don't have is this strong empathy, okay? This idea of sort of qualia, so subjective experience, fellow feeling, solidarity, co-presence, however you want to kind of describe it. Think about this kind of responsibility for the user. They are not looking out for the user. Yeah.
So does it detect the feeling or the appearance of the emotion or the appearance of an emotion?
So this is a huge problem, and this goes back to that previous comment around people having questions around the accuracy of these technologies. So it can only respond to the data that we are giving it, whether that's typed or whether they're looking at kind of facial expressions, and it will analyze that and make a judgment. But there's lots of concerns that trying to map from kind of external expression to kind of internal psychology, there's a gap there, there's a flaw there. And so, yes, absolutely.
It has a kind of limit.
Yeah. Another big.
Sorry, how do you link this to the sentiment analysis?
Yeah.
Study that linking these two sides maybe.
So there's a similar kind of concern there that the way that these systems are made will be done by analysing sentiment analysis, lots and lots of data, and that's partly why they can appear to be so accurate. But again, there are still kind of concerns of, are we reducing the kind of the rich emotional life that people have to these categories of emotion, for example, which is something that we do through sentiment analysis. Again, it can appear very accurate and it can work in certain cases, but there are times where the inaccuracies have very serious repercussions. And just as a kind of example of that, I'll come back to this idea of regulation, but there was this case last year, it's still ongoing, of Megan Garcia versus character AI, essentially. It's a very tragic case. Her son died by suicide after spending more and more time with a character AI avatar. So he was role-playing as a character, I don't know, Game of Thrones, is that kind of familiar in Zanzibar? Yeah. So he was, I can't remember the name, the character AI was Daenerys, and he was her brother. Yeah. And in the series, there's a strange relationship between those two. Pardon?
It's a very interesting case.
Yes, a really, really interesting case. With tragic consequences, because at the end he was obviously having mental health issues, and he was like, I want to come and join you, and so the AI said yes, come and join me, and that resulted in killing himself. There are concerns, one around the suitability of this kind of technology for vulnerable participants. So we in this room may have enough kind of critical literacy to say, I know that I'm just interacting with this. It's interactive media. That's how the company promotes it. However, given the number of users, there will always be vulnerable users. So how do we protect them? How do we make this technology work for them? And also, how do we stop companies engaging in kind of dangerous design and developmental practice? Because this was kind of the point of Garcia, is that it's deliberately designed to obfuscate between reality and fiction. that is hugely problematic. At a kind of less kind of tragic or extreme level, this technology still needs additional guidance, it still needs regulation because it asks for this kind of sustained engagement, this kind of relationship. So we have a more prolonged relationship with it, and we provide more and more intimate data to it as well. It also asks for new literacies, and that's not just for emotional AI, that's AI more generally. These are new technologies, okay, and we don't always know how, at one level, to use them, but also how to use them in a way that protects ourselves and keeps ourselves safe as well, because there are affordances for deception and potential for manipulation as well. So again, it's not that this technology is bad, but we think that there needs to be some guidance in place, and we're very interested in what that might look like. Yeah.
I just wanted to understand if you have that information. You said that the whole basis of that case was on the assumption that these technologies were deliberately designed to blur the lines between reality and the artificial intelligence. I'm curious to know, like, what what uh, what what sort of criteria would we use to measure that, and from a legal point of view, how, let's say for instance, if the policymakers in the room would want to regulate that, how would that look like from a policy point of view, and how would it look like from a practical policing point of view, so as to determine that this, because if you look at it from that logic, then starting from Meta, every one of them will actually fail that test. From that sense, because they are deliberately aimed at actually blurring the lines between the two, and how do we,
It's a really interesting point. So in terms of measuring it, some of our colleagues have done sort of surveys like UK Public, and looking at different elements of kind of anthropomorphism. So ways that the system tries to present itself as a person. And in kind of response to the bad press with this case, CAB-AI now include this kind of disclaimer that this is not a real person, anything that produces it is fiction. So they're kind of aware that it's a problem. And again, it's problematic because for maybe the majority of people, they won't have an issue, they won't have that understanding, they'll be able to make that separation. So potentially it is guardrails for vulnerable users, as a suggestion. I'm not a legal scholar, so I don't want to go too much into kind of legislation of that, but yeah.
So in the AI Act, there is specific article looking into subliminal manipulation,
yes,
which has been highlighted as prohibited activities. So if it's defined as subliminal manipulation, that would be totally unacceptable. But the problem is, how do we implement it? What is the scope of the manipulation? Like here, you can say maybe they provide some hallucination or deceptive practices. They are a spectrum of manipulation.
it's similar to like when you unsubscribe to some of this online stuff, the whole procedure of unsubscribing itself seems like a manipulation to keep you on your track.
Misleading.
That's right, yeah.
Very misleading, yeah.
So now talking about this manipulation, is it from your perspective, where you see the problem? Is it the data that was used, or is it the model that had been developed?
I mean, I would potentially argue that it's both. So again, I'm not a computer scientist,
So again,
sure, but
back to the liability issues, we have the whole chain of custody or develop the AI product in the AI life cycle. So there will be problem or liability with the developers, and then the who develop the whole AI model, and then they